All right, so we will be recording this to put on the website, so those that can't join us today will be able to watch at their own convenience. Welcome to our third installment of our Designation Rubric webinar series. This is going to be the only one where we combine two attributes into one meeting, and it is because Attribute 3 and Attribute 4 are so short in comparison with even Attribute 1, where we have 5 different elements there. So as we are moving through, I would like to apologize because I have been saying Attribute 4 assessment, which it does cover assessment, but the title of that one is actually achievement, and I have corrected that. So apologies for that misunderstanding there. If you are joining us for the first time, my name is Misty Brown. I'm a STEM Relationship Manager with TSIN. I do run the communications, so you can find me on our Twitter as well. I have my email at the very end, so if you have a question that pops up later on, don't hesitate to send me an email. I'm happy to get back to you about that. I think I've finally caught up with everyone's emails that they had sent me over previous webinars. So today we are going to get started with professional development. That is Attribute 3. So when we are looking at professional development and we're looking at it for the rubric, we are looking not just at an overall program, but how you can also personalize professional development for your teachers. So when we are looking at this, it's not just the school level, but it's also the personalized plans. How are teachers encouraged to find, complete, and grow in their professional development individually, as opposed to having one blanket plan that everyone follows? So it is important to look at those short-term and long-term goals that teachers are using, but also the short-term and long-term goals for the school. So when you are looking at professional development, I do encourage you to go back to the sustainability plan, and there is a place in there to talk about professional development and how you will grow that. And I believe I've touched on, but I want to reiterate that that sustainability and action plan is a beautiful template to be able to start every single school year. Start this year, complete it. When you go to next year, go back and look at the first year and look at how you've grown, how you've adapted, and have that comparison. Once you are through 5 years, that is going to give you a narrative of the growth of your school, your STEM or STEAM program that you will need for the redesignation process. Because again, designation does last for 5 years. So let's talk about 3.1, quality STEM STEAM professional learning. Emphasis on the quality. I do not believe it's a stretch as a former educator to say that we have all attended a professional development session or professional learning session that was not as high quality as it could have been. I think we have all had that feeling that we just sat through 30 minutes that we won't get back. The key here when we're looking at your professional learning in your school is the quality of the product. We also want to make sure that it's being provided throughout the school year and not just on that beginning of the school year in service time or that voting day in service time, making sure that it is implemented throughout the year to support your teaching staff. So let's look at our rubric. Now, every school I've ever been involved with or visited has some amount of large group professional development sessions. Those are still going to happen. We know that those happen because the district has announcements or the state has announcements and they have to go out to the whole school. Do not think that to move into the accomplishing or model range that those won't be occurring. We know that that's simply not going to be the case. When we move from early and developing on the rubric, we are seeing that we're going not just to those large group professional development sessions, but we are starting to move into teachers having unique goals. So when you're doing your beginning of the year conferences, and obviously we're halfway through a school year, so that's not going to happen this year. But as you move forward, think about how teachers might set their own professional development goals. How do they then assess if they've completed those professional development goals? Those are going to be accomplished through both large and small group professional development sessions. And of course, we have the school-based STEM and STEAM strategies that you can have access to and you're going to be putting out so that the entire staff is speaking the same language, that understands the same STEM and STEAM strategies as a whole. And of course, that consistency for your students is going to be key in their success. So teachers are also going to have the opportunity starting in accomplishing and observing their colleagues and engaging in a formal reflection and discourse of the practice. Now, the easiest way to say this is we've got peer-to-peer observation and feedback in teachers. Does that sometimes come at the cost of a planned time? Yes. Or maybe you have someone come in and watch a class while another teacher observes a teacher that is maybe a mentor. Either way, it does cause for some flexibility. However, the peer-to-peer feedback, as opposed to feedback that might come from someone in power, can be huge for a growth because there is not a power struggle or an ultimatum. Instead, it's just good practice to have open communication with peers. And of course, when we look at PD sessions, we want to make sure that those are aligned to what the school is doing. What is the programming of the school? What are the students' learning needs? And how does that professional development make STEM happen in that school for those kids? So that is going to be your accomplishing range. Now, when we move into model, that's where we are getting even more personalized. We are getting specific things about inquiry-based instruction. We are looking at a formalized reflection when we're looking at the colleague-to-colleague observations. And we are looking at teachers that are able to participate in those externships or mentorships. Some of those can be offered through TSIN. If you're having difficulty finding some of those, reach out to your hub. They also are there to help you use those mentorships and externships, especially in higher education. They will help you facilitate those. Now, here's where it gets tricky. What are you looking for when you look for the evidence? Well, when you are documenting your professional learning, you are looking at, are you getting professional learning about PBL, any one of the PBLs, integrated instruction, research-based practices? Are we able to show a collaborative planning time so that teachers can actually work again to make sure that as we grow professionally and together, we can work together? And of course, STEAM and STEM focused content knowledge. And that can go everywhere from digital arts to healthcare science to information technology. It's a vast range of content knowledge. Now, this is also going to mean that you're attending content area conferences as well. They can be national, they can be regional, and sometimes we don't have the ability to travel. I do encourage you to look at what is virtual right now, because a lot of organizations have switched from an in-person conference to a virtual conference, and sometimes even an on-demand conference that you can watch and still get that professional credit for. We are also looking at a tailored professional learning plan for your specific needs, for each teacher's specific needs. When we look at the job embedded and practice-based approaches to professional learning, that again has a lot to do with that peer-to-peer feedback, where we have everything embedded within the job for peers to help each other. If you can, attending a conference with the your content area at a state level is encouraged. We have different Tennessee organizations for each of the different curricula. And then if you can participate in that PBL professional learning and show evidence of that, that can be everything from programs to certificates of participation. And that's going to be for any of the professional learning series. And of course, observing each other and having information about those observations. Of course, what does that look like when you are working together? Well, it looks like a schedule of your professional development as a school or as a PLC, small group, individual, any type of schedule that you can put down where you can say what the professional development is, what it's about, because a lot of them do have titles or names, or the organizations give them a very specific theme. Put what it's about, who attended, when it was, and then if you can, it's great to have a reflection of how it's applicable or how it was applied. If you have staff presenting, do they have an agenda? Were there notes taken? And of course, that master schedule that is way back on 1.5 is going to show you those collaborative planning times. This is another place where we see evidence that is going to cross over and be used in multiple attributes. And of course, if you are doing peer-to-peer observation and feedback, do you have those forms? What's the template to the form look like? And what does it look like when people are working together? So, from a school that was designated, here are a couple examples. They have provided for us what the training was, how it aligned, when they were actually, when they were at the training, so the times, and how many professional development credit hours were actually received there. And of course, those can vary. So that's a beautiful way of saying how qualitative the professional development was. Quantitative, not qualitative. Of course, if it's all staff, we already have a list of your staff. Just put that it was an all staff event. And I've of course redacted the names on some of these others. What they've also given us is professional developments that they were able to put the presentations in. They have given us folders of different professional learning has happened. And so all of that is available to you in SlideRoom. If you put a whole folder in and you give us the link to that folder, we are then able to go in and scan through, open up those documents and look at them. That is absolutely acceptable. Yeah, here they have professional learning, but here's their mentorship program for teacher to teacher. So how did they begin that? They start with this presentation, and then that actually has all of their forms and everything in it as well. Before we move on to 3.2, that was a lot very quickly. Do you all have questions on 3.1? Okay, we'll move forward. If a question does pop up, feel free to put that in the chat. I do have that up. 3.2, designing PBLs. I know I've talked about it before. PBLs come in many different forms. They are problem, project, place-based, phenomena-based. Do whatever works for your school in that particular opportunity. It does not have to be one and done. Now, the key here in designing PBLs is these are custom designed to provide the relevant learning. If you are using something like defined learning to help support PBL development, that's great. They have some wonderful PBLs out there. And if you're in a grade 5 through 8, the state is actually providing those for you for free. The key is that you can go into any of those systems like defined learning, you go in and you personalize them for your kids. Teachers are very resourceful. And in those resources, sometimes you will pull something down, and I'm gonna say teachers pay teachers. Maybe you've pulled something from there. The key is, how did you then take that and make it right for your kids? Anybody is able to go in and buy a lot of different lesson plans, a lot of PBLs, but if they're not customized back to your kids, your school, and your message, then it's still a canned program. So the key is showing how you are making this right for your kids, and that we're providing them those opportunities to research challenges within their community. And that's going to absolutely differ from our rural communities, it's 95% of our state, to our urban communities. And even within some of our cities where we have multitudes of those different types, we have both urban, suburban, and rural. It can change from school to school. So making sure that it is right for your student body. So when we look at designing PBLs, we are looking at, in the early and in the developing, that these are PD sessions that are just, they're informative. We have some samples, and I love a good sample. I love to have an exemplar to start going by. That's one of my learning styles. Once you get those samples though, or you get that information on the development of a PBL, you then have to take it and make it your own. So that's where we go from developing into accomplishing, is the custom design. And PBLs are so much more rich, robust, meaningful for the students when you collaborate on them. When you get a person who is more of a science and math minded person in with an art person, and with someone who is doing writing as maybe their primary, you are going to see that that PBL just grows and blossoms. So in moving from the accomplishing to the model, this is where we start to bring in partners. Now, those partners could be higher ed, or they could be industry partners. And what you're going to be able to do there is they are going to contribute to your PBL process. Now, if it is an industry partner, they may be contributing with a real world problem that you're now going to work on. If it's a higher ed, maybe it's your hub and they are coming in and they're going to lead the students through an activity, something that you wouldn't have access to otherwise. The other part that brings you into the model range is going to be integrating those 21st century learning skills. Now, when you receive this presentation, or when you access everything on the web, you are going to be able to click there. That is a live link that takes you back out. Same that it's a live link on the actual rubric. So incorporating those learning skills, those soft skills that people call them, to really make students well-rounded in their learning. So what do PBL units look like? Well, this is a very complete list, but if you are still getting started or you're on a 2-year process, you may look at this and not be there yet. That's okay. This is ultimately what we want to build up into. Some of the key things to look at are that the learning is student-led, that it's interdisciplinary or cross-curricular, that it is engaging in the real world for both content and solutions. We know in the real world that problems can be solved in a multitude of ways, and finding the most effective way to solve a problem is often the key. You might have a portfolio that allows students to portray their learning in terms of how they collect their work. You might also have group projects that have multiple people involved with the planning, the research, and the presenting of all of the information. So having a collection there where you can see all of the student voices coming together. Now, as you are looking at the experimentation, as you are looking at the culminating projects, think about how you are authentically assessing these products. We want the students to be producing an authentic product. So how are we authentically assessing it? And rubrics are often the go-to for PBLs. There's a lot of different rubric creators out there, so I highly encourage you to use those. So here again is from a school that was designated last year. We have examples of work that was done, but we also have information on the PBLs that were built, everything from pumpkins. And how did they actually talk to their staff about those 21st century skills? This is a beautiful way to collect information about your PBLs. When we went into these, we would not only have the PBL PBL lesson, the actual planning of it, but what we would also have is student work, showing what the students learned and the reflection pieces that went along with that. And that actually is everything for Attribute 3. Are there questions though about 3.2 and PBLs.
Right here.
Hey, Miss Brown, this is Stacy Hammond, Arlington Middle School. I wanted to
Hello.
know I wanted to know if some of the PBLs could be used twice, so it seems like it's very connected to 2.1 as well.
Yes. So one of the things that you'd want to do is put in the just a schedule, what it might look like. So if you are using PBLs at different grade levels, then you can put in how many times it's used. I know with high school, if you're on a block schedule, then you may be using them in the fall and then again in the spring because you have switched over classes. So putting in a schedule there as to how they're being implemented, it absolutely works. And you can also say
Hi.
what is a school-wide PBL and what is a grade level PBL or a class PBL.
Hi, this is Letitia King. I'm at Arlington Middle School as well. And she said actually what she's asking is in attribute 2, 2.1, she
Can we
wants,
use the
can the
evidence
same, can they
twice?
use the evidence twice?
Yes, 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 yes. You are going to have crossover in those. I misunderstood on that one. Yes, you are, as you are building PBLs, you do not have to have one set in 2.1 and then another set in 3.2. You can actually use the same PBLs. It is important to make sure, though, that you do have them linked into each part of the application process because they won't naturally link within the system. All right, we will move into achievement. I do apologize. We have to look at STEAM. How does STEAM fit in? Really, it's the exact same, but what we need to see is a very specific pointed integration of the arts in those PBLs. So are you including music, dance, theater, physical art, digital art, as all of that or some part of that being included in each of the PBLs? And that would also be in the research and in the content knowledge. So if you are looking at that STEAM component, make sure that you are very directly pointing out where the arts are being included in your PBLs. And professional learning. So are your art instructors, are they actually getting in there? Are they leading integrated instruction? Are they showing how their content knowledge is applicable in a variety of ways? Okay, achievement. Achievement is the last of the academic areas. When we get into our last section, attribute 5, that is less academic than the previous 3 sections. When we look at achievement, we really want to ensure that it is strong, innovative, and cohesive to your STEM or STEAM program. Those are the 3 big attributes there for achievement. So in 4.1, and again, this just reiterates a strong, innovative, cohesive STEM program. How is a variety of assessments actually being incorporated to have that strong, innovative, cohesive program? How do students demonstrate their knowledge? How do they have the authentic tasks that show their knowledge? And how are we getting work-based learning in there? When we look at our performance assessment, this is 4.1, you are going to have some very traditional information. When you look at early and developing and all the way through, you are continually going to see statewide data. We all have it. This is going to include either your report card or your revised data where it's drilled down and you actually have talked about your data with the staff in a presentation. How do you use that state data to inform instruction? So there will be a section in there that either has your TCAPs or your TN Ready. If you are a high school or some middle schools taking the PSAT, you're going to have that information that you can also use. Things like the ASVAB, things like the ACT, SAT, your college board scoring for AP classes. All of that is going to be in the instructional information that you could be using. Now, of course, as we start to move up in the rubric, we see that students are starting to become involved. And when we look at students' observations being included as the assessment tool, teachers are watching their students every day. They can tell you about their behavior, about their ins and outs, their tells. And so as we start to personalize learning and performance assessments to those students, those observations need to be included as well. When we get into accomplishing and we get into model, teachers are starting to use those performance-based assessments to determine student learning. We all know that the performance-based assessment gives you a much more authentic, true knowledge of whether they've grasped the material versus a multiple choice test. We are looking at pre and post assessments that can be used in student growth. And while these may be a 3-question pre-assessment, that still counts. So how are we getting that prior knowledge assessed to know how to teach and what to teach? We want to look at the non-traditional assessments as well. How are teachers using dialogue with their students in order to monitor their progress? And then teachers are using observation and dialogue to assess the problem solving and innovation that students are using. Now, as we start to look further into the model range, we also want to talk about how students participate in self-evaluation and goal settings consistently. And that may seem very daunting for a younger grade level. And so you have to really take that goal setting and self-evaluation down to a level that is appropriate for your younger grades. And that can be very simple to, I want to finish my project, and how do you think it went? Well, you have a smiley face, a neutral face, and a frowny face. And then a kid can tell you why they feel which one they feel. So starting them off smaller and then letting them grow in those self-reflection and goal-setting activities. So what does this look like on your end? I am not going to lie, 4.1 can be a pretty big file that you're going to be submitting. Okay, if you are really getting in there, if you're really assessing on that personal level and using all that state data, you're probably going to be submitting a lot. However, this is probably something that you've already collected because you began your school year with last year's data and you've already started collecting on this year. If your students are using things like Ames Web, that's going to play into that as well. So having portfolios that show the collections of the work, that's going to be part of it. We are also going to be looking at how those group presentations and projects are working, and how the students are illustrating their understanding of STEM concepts. And again, this is all straight from the rubric, but where you really probably have questions is, what does it look like specifically from you? Well, it might look like portfolios. It might look like data walls, and you can take pictures of your data walls. Some people have actually started doing them virtually as well, and that's been pretty cool. There's some interesting data processing software that's out there that can make things very visual. A meeting schedule. When do your grade levels, when do your PLCs meet and talk about student information? Now, the state and district required testing data, you can pull all of that down, or you could put in how you talk to your staff about it. I've seen schools where the leadership team has distilled the information and they talk about it as a whole staff, and that may be more fitting for what you do. This can also be examples of student goal setting and reflection and student mastery of content. So we can have that PBL, we can have that testing data, again, like the Ames Web. All of that is going to be evidence that you might be submitting. Now, this is just a fraction of what one school did submit when they looked at their variety of data assessment. everything from surveys to rubrics to KWL charts that students always used and went back to. So you're going to have a variety of data collection that you would put in there. Questions about 4.1? Was very, very fast. Okay. (4.2) accountability data. So this does look different than 4.1. This is how you are tracking students individually and how those individual trackings lead to instructional decisions and then promote that achievement. This is not just vertically or horizontally. It's not just formative or summative. It's all of the above. So when we look at our rubric, if you are in the early stages, you are minimally using student data to guide instruction. I don't feel like that's going to be the case for any of our instructors here. You might only be using state data. And instead of tracking for all students, you're only tracking special populations, maybe like a high-risk group. Going into developing, again, standardized test data is going to inform just the school and the staff. And you might be collecting some formative data too about your students. But again, that's very much a bare minimum of tracking how students are doing. Between accomplishing and model, we are suddenly upping the game. In addition to those standardized testing, we are also looking at other types of standardized tests. So ACT, and which is required by the state for graduation, but is not required at other specific grade levels, like a freshman who might take the ACT or PSAT in order to get some additional information. We again have the formative data, but the key between accomplishing and model on the formative data is that the teacher is also maintaining the records for that formative data for the students. That's keeping your grades up. That's your formative data, and keeping your grades up is maintaining your records. Student data that is going to be tracked and possibly used to create some type of student learning plan, that is going to be in your accomplishing. But when we look at model, we are looking at each student has an individualized education plan or learning plan. And then from data walls and other data tracking, we actually continue that and add in student data conferences so the students know how they are progressing and where they can improve. Now, again, for younger kids, that's going to be a much more simplified topic of conversation than it is for our older students. And that goes back to that goal setting and that constant reflection. When you bring the data into that conference, then you're going to have a much more robust goal setting session. This does require built-in planning time for teachers that, as they interpret that student data and they make those adjustments. So are teachers getting the time to really get into the data and do what's best for their kids? Is there an instructional change based on data? Can we see where a teacher had a particular idea and then change their information based on what students presented to them? And is there evidence that students are participating in that self-evaluation and goal setting? So here we have 4.2 in accountability, what this might look like when you're submitting. So we can see Ames Web, different information there from Ames Web. We can see a schedule for making that accountability conversation occur. We can see our goal walls. We can also see how we talk about accountability in different presentations, and that's one for the staff, but also one for the students. So talking to your students about what it means to be accountable is also a topic in a presentation that you might be including. Questions about 4.2? Now, if you are saying things like, I have 900 students, I can't have an individual plan for all 900 students. Think about how students can be part of building their own plan. Think about how they can be part of building their own portfolio, and then that being shared with the teacher as well. If you are looking at including STEAM, how are the arts integrated in your assessments? And this is not just a performance assessment. This is also in the assessments that are happening in your rubrics and your classes discussions, and how the assessments are actually informing that student instructional practice for all of your students. How are the arts involved in that assessment? Okay, overall questions for attributes 3 and attributes 4. This was definitely a quick one today, a bit faster than last time when we had 7 different sections to go through. Again, if you do have questions, please feel free to email me at any time. I am happy to get back to you with an answer as quickly as I can find one. And I thank you for spending a little time this afternoon with me.